Hi, I'm Gary Thomas from the College of Western Idaho, here again with more math help. Today we're going to learn how to find logarithms using a calculator. This seems like a pretty simple skill, and it isn't very complicated, so you might be tempted not to watch this, but I'm going to throw in a couple extra tips, and I encourage you to watch it anyway. General advice. First off, when we need to find a logarithm, this is a calculator skill, and so you will be tempted to use your cell phone, which has a nice calculator on it. Don't do this. And the reason is when you take a test, you're not allowed to use a cell phone. What you need to do when you're working homework is to practice the skill using the tools you'll be required to use when you perform. And so you should always use the calculator that you are allowed to use on a test and not a cell phone. So that's trick number one. Let's look at an example problem. The logarithm of 125. Well, depending on which calculator you have, you're going to do this in different ways. Some require you to put in the number first and then press a button that says log or something like that. Some of your calculators will require you to press log first and then enter the value and then an enter or an equal sign. It depends on the sort of calculator you have. You can certainly play with it, but let me give you a second tip. And that is anytime you want to do anything with your calculator, just go to Google, type in the name of your calculator, which is on the top of the calculator, and then whatever you're trying to do. Logarithms, graphing, solution of an equation, and you'll find a nice video, 5 or 10 minutes, by someone explaining how to do that. So it's easy to learn how to use your calculator using the internet. So let's try this one. We're trying to find the logarithm of 125. Notice that I've forgotten to write the base. No, I've not actually forgotten to write the base. The base is 10, and we don't write 10 if it's a common logarithm. So this is a common logarithm. The logarithm is base 10. And another trick that I want to teach you is before you use your calculator, you need to do a sanity check. So try this out in your own mind, and it's easy to do it on your fingers so that you have an idea of what the correct answer will be. And that way, if your calculator comes up with something vastly different, you'll be able to catch your mistake and you won't be embarrassed on a test. So here, my base, it's invisible, is 10. And so if I'm trying to get to 125, I say 10 to the first power is 10. 10 squared is 100. 10 cubed is 1,000. Well, I'm way too high. So my answer is going to be 2 something, and I already know this, and so I could just start off writing it's 2 something, and now I'll use my calculator to verify that. So let's enter this into our calculator. The logarithm, that's the common log, of 125. I happen to be using a TI-84 Plus Silver Edition, but it doesn't matter what sort of calculator you have or what brand it is. They all have the ability to calculate logarithms, and you just have to find the button. Again, if you can't find it, Google and YouTube will show you how to do it. Here we go, the log of 125. I press the log button. I enter my 125. The parentheses are there, so I can close the parenthesis here. And I enter the enter key, and I'm told that it's 2.096910013. It goes on for quite a while. We're seeing 8 digits, but we can round it to whatever's appropriate. So there's our answer, 2.0969 after some appropriate rounding. Let's try the next one. This one is a natural logarithm, so we're finding the natural logarithm. In other words, the logarithm base e. And again, your calculator has a button that will allow you to do a natural logarithm. It might be its own button. It might be a button where you have to press the second. It's typically orange or blue or some color, and reuse another button, maybe the log, maybe the e to the x. It depends on your brand of calculator. And if you can find it easily, then you're good to go. And if not, use my trick. Go to Google, type in the name of your calculator, and say you want to find a natural logarithm. Our next problem to find on the calculator is the natural logarithm of 17. On this calculator, the ln button is just underneath the log button, so it's easy to find. Sometimes you'll find that the ln button needs an extra button press. You might have to press the second key because it might be an extra subsidiary function that's located somewhere else. But this is very convenient. I enter the ln, and I put in the 17, and I close my parenthesis, and I press enter, and my answer is 2.833213344, which again I'll round to something appropriate. What I forgot to do before I did this was to try it out. The natural logarithm base is e. It's 2.71828, and because it's a transcendental number, it's an irrational number, it goes on forever. It never repeats and it never ends, but we can still use it to estimate our value for the natural logarithm of 17. Here, because 2.71828, I have no idea what powers of 2.71828 are, but it's pretty close to 3, and I can do powers of 3. So again, I say 3 to the first is 3, 3 squared is 9, times 3 is 27. Oh, I'm too big. So again, I'm thinking 2-ish, and that's exactly the answer we just got using the calculator. Recall that after some rounding, it was 2.8332. For our next example, let's find the logarithm of 6. Again, I haven't written a base, and so this is a common logarithm. The base is 10, and it's invisible. You can't see it, but it's there. So here's what I do. I'm going to estimate it. I say 10. Wait, I'm already too big. Yes, so this is a hint. This is a tip. This is something to notice as you do these. Anytime the value you are trying to find is less than your base, so in this situation 6 is less than 10, the logarithm you get will always be less than 1. So we go to our calculator and we find the logarithm of 6. The logarithm of 6, by now we're really good at this. Here comes logarithm 6. Let me tell you a shortcut. If you're only doing simple problems like this one, the calculator is smart enough to know that you mean the logarithm of 6. So whether I enter the trailing parenthesis or not, it will still come up with the answer. So if you're as lazy as I am, you could leave these off if all you're doing is one operation. I can press the enter key without the closing parenthesis, and it still gives me the answer. It turns out to be 0.778151250, and we won't use all those digits. And as predicted, our value was a little less than 1. Last but not least, here's the logarithm of 0.25. And again, we don't see a base, so we know this is the common logarithm, base 10. And we try it again, estimating 10. Oh, this is way too big. In fact, this 0.25 is not only smaller than 10, so we know our logarithm will be smaller than 1. It's actually less than 1. And so here's one more trick. When you find the logarithm of something smaller than 1, your logarithm will always be negative. And so here, my prediction before I pull out my calculator is that it will be negative 0 point something, and we'll find out the something by using our calculator. Here we are trying to calculate the logarithm of 0.25. Press the log button, enter my 0.25. I'm lazy, I'm leaving off the closing parenthesis. I press enter, and there's my answer, negative 0.60205999913. And yes, remember we were expecting a negative. And again, here's our answer rounded to 4 digits. All right, let's try one more example, and this one has an extra trick to it. Here, we want to find the log base 2 of 9. So as usual, I'm going to estimate it, counting on my fingers, so that when I use my calculator, I'm sure that I've got the right answer. So, powers of 2. 2 to the first power is 2. 2 squared is 4. 2 cubed is 8. 2 to the 4th is 16. I'm too big, so I'm going to back up, and the answer I'm getting for this is 3-ish, right? 2 to the 3rd power is 8, and it's going to be a little bit more than that. So now I would like to grab my calculator and enter the 9 and then push the log 2 button. And the only problem is my calculator doesn't have a log 2 button. So what am I going to do? Math has a solution. So over here is the change of base formula. And what it says is that the log base b of some positive value m equals the log base a of m over the log base a of b. What? This gets really complicated really fast. And it's too bad because it's a very valuable formula. It's a wonderful thing to use. One problem is, what's this a? Because there was no a in here. What am I supposed to use? It just comes up seemingly out of nowhere. And the other problem is that in a course where you're using this formula, you're typically not given a formula sheet. Does that mean I have to memorize this formula? No, because you're here for Gary's math help, and I have a secret method to use. Instead of calling this the change of base formula, I always call it the my calculator doesn't have that button formula, which was the situation we were in. I'm trying to find the log base 2. My calculator doesn't have that button. And so the way I think of it is, there's a conversation. Someone says, what's the log base 2 of 9? And I say, my calculator doesn't have that button. And they say, well, what buttons do you have? And I say, well, I have a log button. That's the common log base 10. I have that button. And they say, okay, use that. And that's what this a is. So I can use the log base 10 to calculate both of these values. And how do I remember which is which? Here's the secret. This b is written lower. And it's kind of a tiny thing because it's written lower. And so the b goes on the bottom. And this m is on top. He's big, he's above the b, and so he's on top, he's above the b. And so you don't have to memorize this formula. All you have to do is think of it. The b is smaller, so it's in the bottom. The m is bigger, so it's on top, it's higher up. And then use whatever logarithm key you have. And if you want to use log, use log. If you want to use natural log, the ln key, use ln. It doesn't matter any key that your calculator has. Which should you pick? Whatever's your favorite. Whatever's easier to get to on your calculator. So some of you have calculators where the log button is easy to get to, and if you want to calculate the ln, you have to use one of those second functions, and it takes 2 keystrokes, and you're liable to mess it up. And so in that case, use whichever one is easier. Use whichever one is more obvious. So we calculated on the calculator like this. The logarithm base 2 of 9. I don't have a log base 2 button. I should mention, just as an aside, that some of you will have calculators that do have a log base 2 button, or you might have a function that's built in to your calculator somewhere in one of these fancier buttons that allows you to use any base. But this change of base formula is so easy to use. It's hard to remember, but it's easy to use. Remember log base 2, so 2 is our bottom number. It will be in our denominator. Of 9, 9 is the bigger number, and so it will be on top and in our numerator. So I can pick either button that I like. For consistency, I use the first button I come to, which in this calculator is the log button. So I'm finding the common logarithm of 9, and then I'm dividing by the smaller number, the base, the common logarithm of 2. So the logarithm of 9, here I have to make sure I include my trailing parenthesis because I'm going to do more than one operation, divided by the logarithm of 2. And so you see that this makes sense. The 9 was the taller number, and the 2 was the lower number, and so 9 is above 2. And I don't have to memorize some complicated formula with a lot of letters. All I have to remember is to press the log key, or whichever key I do have, and put in the numbers in the right order. I press enter, and I get a result of 3.169925001. On your calculator, you might not want to use the log button. You might want to use the natural logarithm button. And as long as you're consistent, it doesn't matter which button you use, just use whichever button you have. So let me show you this with a natural logarithm. The natural logarithm of 9 I need the closing parenthesis because I have more than one operation, divided by the natural logarithm of 2, closing parenthesis, gives me the exact same answer. So this change of base formula works for any sort of logarithm base you want. Here's base 10, and here's base e, and it still gives us an answer of a logarithm base 2. And that's all there is to it. We have our answer. We were able to calculate a log to an arbitrary base by using this change of base formula. And you notice as we were using the formula, we didn't have to have it memorized. You will never on any test be asked to write this out. You just have to be able to use it. So remember my shortcuts. M is on top, so it's on top. B is on the bottom, so it's on the bottom. Use any log key you have. This isn't really the change of base formula. It's the, my calculator doesn't have that key formula.